Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to ask you, my dear friends, once again for your film recommendations in a particular genre of cinema. I always get a big kick out of these types of questions to you, my dear friends, because it affords me the opportunity to learn from you and to get guidance from you and to get great recommendations from you in a particular field or genre of cinema. And also it affords me the opportunity to see your displays of affection and enthusiasm and boundless energy for this thing which we all love, which is cinema. And I'm ever grateful to you for showing me and for giving me these great ideas and giving me these possibilities and new avenues of exploration. So thank you so much, my dear friends. As always, I am always grateful and indebted to you. And today I'd like to now ask another question with regard to the genre of cinema. This time that genre being the disaster movie genre. So the question is, my dear friends, what are some of your favorite films in this genre of cinema known as disaster movies? Do you have any recommendations in this particular field that you would be willing to share with me and with everyone else here? If so, I would love to hear what it is you have to say. Please feel free to share your thoughts and comments and ideas and recommendations in the comment section below. As always, it would be my pleasure to read what it is you have to say about this particular question. I bring it up, too, because I was speaking with a friend of mine maybe a few weeks ago or so, and during that conversation, the question about disaster movies came up, and the question was asked of me about, do I like this particular genre? And this conversation was so much fun, and so I thought, why not take this question and ask it to you, my friends. And just to give you a little bit of background for me and my own experiences with this particular genre, which I acknowledge can be a very broad one, and I acknowledge that the disaster movie category is so big and it's so subject to various forms of interpretation that I think it could also be subject to subcategorization, and even within those subcategories of genre there could be even further levels of subgenre. And so you might have disaster films that are focusing in on, say, man-made disaster topics, or maybe disasters that are focusing in on natural disasters, or maybe more fantasy elements like monsters or some kind of alien invasion, that sort of thing. So I think the possibilities as far as variants of genre are quite boundless, which is one of the things that makes it so exciting for me to watch in terms of the various modes of interpretation from filmmakers, as well as the different genres themselves that this disaster movie category can touch upon. It can even go into areas of sci-fi, it could go into horror, it could go into soap opera, it could go into fantasy, it could go into these maybe political thrillers, and I think that is a very exciting thing in terms of the malleability of this particular area of cinema. And I should perhaps say too that my own personal experience is that while I don't claim to have seen every single quote-unquote disaster film that has ever been made, because there are so many, and the number is quite voluminous. I did see a number of them growing up as a kid, and I think it was during that time that they really stuck with me, and to the extent that even now I recall with great fondness the times that I was watching these films and those scenes and the memorable moments and the bits of music and the surprises and the spectacle that came with these works of entertainment. So, for example, I remember seeing broadcast on TV when I was a little kid films like The Towering Inferno or The Poseidon Adventure. And these are, of course, very famous within the category or the subcategory of 1970s American disaster cinema. Or even within that category, there perhaps is its own subcategory of, say, films from the creative mind of Irwin Allen. And so that is, of course, a very famous name in this category. And so we have The Towering Inferno, The Poseidon Adventure, The Swarm, Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. But I think for me, growing up, it was my first exposure perhaps to this. At the time, it felt to me like it was a new grand type of spectacle. And it had all these famous people in the cast. And it was amazing, and it was just they were playing these different characters. Some of them were villainous, some of them were very heroic, and there were these different relationships that were going on, and it was very exciting. And as I grew older, I just became even more and more enthralled by various aspects of the tapestry of drama and spectacle that was on display when you watch films of this magnitude. And then the discovery continued. I mean, I mentioned, say, Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. I didn't even know about Beyond the Poseidon Adventure until I was a little bit older. As I say, I watched the Poseidon Adventure as a kid when I was quite young, but I didn't hear about the Beyond the Poseidon Adventure until I was a little bit older. And so the hunt began as far as trying to track down these films. And sometimes I would catch some of these films maybe about halfway through as they were playing on TV. And I remember there was this film called, I think it was Fire, with Ernest Borgnine and Vera Miles. I think it was on TV, which was amazing. It was very scary. And speaking of that too, I remember seeing also variants of the disaster film in terms of, say, the insect attacks. Of course, there's The Swarm, but I think another one that could be classified perhaps in a subcategory of this genre would be a film like, say, Bug from the 1970s. I don't know if you know this film, but it was something that I saw again as a kid, and it was broadcast on TV, and it really scared me. And I remember the TV promo that was cut together to promote the film, The Bug, and I was just so frightened by the promo. There was a particular moment where you had a bug that landed on a particular character, and it something, it was very, very scary actually. And so I haven't forgotten about that. That was that made quite an impact. And so, and I don't know how old I would have been at the time when I saw that promo. Would have been maybe 5 or 6 years old or something like that, maybe a little bit older, but I was still quite young. And so these films, I think, made an indelible mark on my maybe cinema journey, as it were. And as I got a little bit older, I realized that I think the field was wide open for variants in the genre. And for example, Hitchcock's The Birds, I think, could fall within this category to a certain extent, of course. And then you go into the opposite direction in terms of chronology. You have films like Jurassic Park, and even around this time in the 90s, when we were getting into what might be called the beginning of a renaissance, if you will, of big budgeted Hollywood blockbuster entertainment of the disaster movie genre. And you had examples like Twister or Volcano or Dante's Peak. And you could even put, or perhaps consider, films like Speed with Keanu Reeves and Dennis Hopper, Pop Quiz, Hot Shot. And so you could have these I think, variants, and it became therefore a very wide spectrum. And that's what I really love about the disaster movie genre. It's quite malleable, and it touches upon various different forms of cinema. Some of them can have, say, a sci-fi bent, maybe a fantasy element bent to them. Maybe some have a little bit of a horror aspect to them. Others might have, say, a more political thriller type of feel to them. Others are suspense types of things, and race against time, and maybe heist type of films, or that type of entertainment and spectacle. And as I say, as I got older, I began to be able to track down a number of these other titles that were just really quite scary and very suspenseful. And yet films like, say, Black Sunday, or films like Juggernaut. I didn't even mention films like the airport films, and I'm a big fan of the airport films. And of course, we know that this spawned, or this inspired, spoofs, or this type of comedies. And so very famously, I think, Airplane and Airplane 2, the sequel. But I was always a big fan of the airport films. But I think I grew up in a time where Airplane and Airplane 2, the sequel, were really big hits among my friends at the time, again, within my age group. But I only began to appreciate a little bit later, when I was older, the grand spectacle nature of the airport films. I mean, you look at some of these films and you think about the casts, which are themselves extraordinary. I mean, for example, Airport 77. I mean, you have this film starring George Kennedy and Jack Lemmon and James Stewart, Christopher Lee, Lee Grant, and Joseph Cotton, Olivia de Havilland, all these people in this one film. It's amazing, and it's a mix between Airport and the Poseidon Adventure, with a little bit of the suspense thriller thrown in. It's amazing. What an amazing spectacle. And then you have, of course, the inspiration leading to great films like Airplane and Airplane 2, the sequel. I love those films very much. And as a kid growing up, I don't think I got, say, half of the jokes, because they went over my head, that's for sure. And I only got many of them much later, when I was older, and I could understand what was going on in terms of the certain levels of maturity that were involved in a lot of the jokes. But still, there was a lot there for young kids like me at the time to enjoy and get into. And I was a big fan, in particular, of Airplane 2, the sequel. I loved that film very much, and there was a particular joke. Well, I don't want to spoil it too much for anyone who hasn't seen Airplane 2, the sequel, but there are some very, very funny jokes in that one. And who knows, maybe one of these days, if the opportunity affords itself, I might take some time and talk a little bit on this channel about Airplane 2, the sequel, because that's one that I saw so many times as a kid. But that's another example of how I think malleable the disaster cinema genre is, because I think it even can go into the comedy territory, because Airplane and Airplane 2, the sequel, are undoubtedly still disaster films. Of course, they're comedy films too, but they're also disaster films because they have their own stories themselves in that vein. And so this is my, again, very long-winded and unsophisticated way of trying to explain that, or trying to suggest that the category itself is very wide, it's very expansive, and it can touch upon many different varying genres. And so hopefully you can take the question which I posed, and you can make of it what you will. And the question, once again, is, my dear friends, what are some of your favorite films in the genre of cinema known as disaster movies? If you have any recommendations for me in this particular category, I would love to hear about them, and please feel free to let me know in the comment section below. Once again, what are some of your favorite disaster movies or examples from this genre? They can be from any time. Maybe there are some that perhaps, given the current climate of the world, might seem all too relevant, perhaps too direct when it comes to subject matter, because as I say, there are many modes, many types of stories being told. But no matter how you look at it, no matter how you view this particular genre, I think there are many possibilities. And so, in any event, my friends, I would very much love to hear what it is you have to say. Okay, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. So I look forward to hearing from you. But until then, my friends, thank you and cheers. One take, one take, one take, one For anyone who's a fan of the film Airplane 2, the sequel, the answer is the Mayflower.